Hello, my name is Aviva, and today I'm going to share with you all of the books that I've read recently. So I have not done a recent reads video in a hot minute. I'm pretty sure my last recent reads video was in the middle of November. And the reason I haven't updated you guys on what I've been reading, not only is because of Bookmas, like I just couldn't fit a recent reads video into the month of December, but also because the second that I finished my November mid-month wrap up, I started reading the Addicted Calloway Sisters series, which ended up taking me about 3 to 4 weeks to finish. So by the time I was done that, and I had already filmed all of my vlogs for it, and you guys got so much Addicted Calloway content. If you haven't seen it, I'll make sure that it's linked down below. I have a whole playlist on how to read the series and then a vlog for every one of the books in the series. So, I did so much on that I didn't have anything to update you guys on specifically. And then by the time I started reading some more books, it was already like almost halfway through the month. So I couldn't do a mid-month wrap up. So I just decided to push it off and update you guys now on everything that I've basically been reading for the past 6 weeks. So happens to be, I have been getting a lot of questions on which Addicted book is my favorite, because I put out so much content, but throughout all of that content, I didn't actually tell you guys like which one I liked more or less or anything like that. There are 10 books in the series, and I definitely do have a more favorite and least favorite one. So I decided that at the end of this video, we're gonna have like an Addicted chat. So anybody who is interested in hearing what I think more about the Addicted series and which book is my favorite, feel free to stick around at the end. But first, I'm going to share with you the 17 books that I have read in the month of December. Before I get into the books though, if you can please subscribe to my channel if you're not currently subscribed, and give this video a like. I also wanted to mention that I'm not going in any particular order of how I read them. I'm just like jumbling them all together in a very random order. And I kind of felt like starting with the 2 books that I DNF'd in December. I hardly ever DNF books. So it was kind of crazy that I had 2 that I DNF'd in the month of December. So the first one that I DNF'd was When Heroes Fall by Gianna Darling. So this is a duet. You're following one story in 2 books, and it's basically about this girl who is a lawyer, and she ends up getting on a case for the head of the mafia who is currently being accused for murder. And the funny thing is that he didn't actually commit the murder that he's being accused of, even though he's the head of the mafia. He obviously has killed a lot of people. So anyway, it's kind of like that setup, like she is now his lawyer, and I don't know, I guess they're going to go through the case and try to get him off and stuff like that. So I think I got about 100 or 190 pages into this book, and then I decided to give up on it because I was not liking anything about it. It was extremely slow. Like, we didn't even get anywhere in the romance yet, and I don't know how far I got in, but it felt far enough where I'm like, how has nothing started yet? Even though it was like a 500-page book, I just wasn't feeling the slowness of it. And then it was very like heavy on like the lawyer-ish information. Like, it was very technical and stuff like that. And I don't know, I wasn't vibing with it. I wasn't connecting to either one of the characters. And then one big thing that really bugged me was that this is actually a spin-off from some other series that Gianna Darling has written. And the things that happened in those series were very much talked about in this spinoff because she was very affected by it. Like, the spinoffs are all about like siblings. So it's like she has this series, and then like she has 2 sisters who each got their own series that came before this. And the stuff that happened in those series were so often talked about in this series. And I didn't like the content of what it was actually about. Like, the stuff that her siblings went through and did to her and everything like that. Like, I was not into any of the dynamics of any of the characters, basically. So whatever, for a lot of reasons, I decided that even though this is really hyped and people say amazing things about it, I decided it just wasn't for me. I also DNF'd this book called Ruthless Creatures by J.T. Geisinger. So this is the first book in a 3-book companion series. I don't know if it's a completed companion series, but the 3rd book recently came out. So I decided I was ready to give this series a shot because I've heard really good things. I'm almost positive it's got like mafia vibes to it, but I only got 100 pages into the first book, so I didn't get there yet to know for sure. But basically, it's about this girl who, the day before her wedding, her fiance disappeared. They never found a body. They don't know what happened to him. And everything like that. And basically for the next 5 years, she was super depressed. So it's 5 years later, she's still in a funk, like she's still like, you know, all about it and everything like that. And then all of a sudden, this guy shows up in town one day, moves in next door to her, and he is just very standoffish. He's obviously very good looking, but like he's acting a little strange, and he takes notice of her and starts getting close to her. And basically they end up having a very quick insta lust, and it was just a little bit too much for me. Like, I absolutely hate insta lust. And then on top of that, I wasn't even vibing with the characters. Like, I didn't really like the description of the guy. It was like very much turning me off. And then the way that he was talking and acting, and I was just like, this is way too quick and this is way too weird. And then the little trickles of what I got the story is going to be about of, like, I wasn't vibing with it. Like, he was obviously very much connected to her fiance that disappeared, and he was there for her, obviously. I don't know what he was going to be doing with her, but like basically he wasn't supposed to be attracted to her, but obviously he was. And like it was starting to be this whole jumble of thing, but like they didn't even talk like twice, and all of a sudden like he wanted to get into her pants. Like, I just wasn't feeling it, and I really wasn't vibing with any of it. And I kind of saw through somewhat where the story was going, and I'm like, I just don't really care for this. So I decided to DNF it. I'm pretty sure around the 100-page mark. I also listened to an audiobook this month called Aurora Rising. It's a very popular series. I'm pretty sure the third and final book just came out recently, but I'm not really into sci-fi or anything like that. So I decided that I'm not going to physically read it, but it doesn't hurt to try and listening to it. And it happens to be, I had a great time listening to it. I thought that it was very entertaining. Like, there were a lot of narrator voices, like, to follow all of the characters, and there were a lot of fun sounds, and it was a really good audiobook. Like, it was one of the best audiobooks I've listened to, even though I'm not really into sci-fi and I didn't love the story enough to continue right away. Also happens to be book 2 wasn't available at the time that I was ready to continue. So I kind of just pushed it off, and now I'm like not sure if I really want to go back to it. But while I listened to it, I did thoroughly enjoy it. So I just wanted to tell you guys that, you know, I tried out a sci-fi book. It wasn't bad, but it wasn't my favorite either, just because I'm not so into like space and everything like that. But it was fun for the time. And it happens to be, after I finished Aurora Rising, I did start to listen to the Heroes of Olympus series by Rick Riordan. So it's funny because I finished reading all of the Percy Jackson books, and then I wanted to move on to this series because this comes after the Percy Jackson books, and it turns from middle grade to YA. And the thing is, I couldn't find these on audio, so I just like pushed it off. I ended up listening to like the Miss Peregrine books, and then, you know, I moved on to Aurora Rising. And then happens to be, after I finished Aurora Rising, I somehow came across the audio of these. Like, for some reason they weren't available at one point, but then they were available. So I started listening to them on audio, and I got 3 books in this month. I am absolutely loving it. I'm currently in the middle of book 4, and I have nothing bad to say about these series. I totally get why they're hyped up. I am loving it. I love all of the characters that we're following. I think it's so much fun. Like Rick Riordan and like Greek mythology and just everything about it. I'm just having a great time. So I did finish these 3 books in December as well. Next, I wanted to share Egomaniac by V. Keelan. So this book starts off with this girl who just rented this office space. She just moved to the city, and, you know, she's going to start her practice there. And one night somebody comes into her office. She thinks she's going to get mugged, and happens to be, it's actually the owner of the office. And really, she got scammed and gave all of her life savings away to a scammer, and now she's out of an office. So this guy kind of like pities her and lets her stay in the office for a little bit until she gets like on her feet, and they're just going to share the space for a little while. So that's what they do. And then obviously they have a bit of a romance. So it's basically like a classic V. Keelan book, like a really hot looking guy who has a good job, very wealthy, you know, working in the city sort of vibe. And then, you know, there's going to be a romance. So it's kind of exactly what you're expecting. Like, it's nothing better than that, but I personally didn't really like it because of the backstory. So like V. Keelan and Penelope Ward in general, they like to give their characters some sort of backstory that ends up driving the story in a specific direction, and also making it a little bit heavier than like, you know, a classic rom-com where everything is perfect all the time. And I do like that about them, but specifically in this book, I wasn't a fan of the backstory of the guy. So I don't really want to get into it. I don't really want to spoil anything, but just everything that surrounded that storyline, and then how the story played out because of it, I really wasn't a fan. It was like making me cringe. I was just like, my blood was boiling. I'm like, how can people do this? Like, I was just so pissed, and I really didn't enjoy reading it, and therefore I didn't love this book so much. I'm still a fan of V. Keeland in general, because you kind of pick up their book and then like you kind of get exactly what you're looking for, like if you're in that mood. But for some reason, this one, it didn't click with me. And then kind of on the same note, I have a Stuck Up Suit by V. Keeland and Penelope Ward, which again, I didn't really like this book because of the same reason as Egomaniac. So I don't even remember what this book was about. It was somewhat of like, I can't remember. Like, that is how much, oh right, this girl meets this guy on a train. Well, she doesn't meet him. She sees him screaming into his phone, and like, she's like, oh my God, he's so arrogant. Like, he's so full of himself. Who does he think he is, talking to a person like that? And anyway, she is looking at him, and then he gets off the train, and then she notices that he dropped his phone. So she kind of takes it, looks through it, and then wants to return it. And then when she goes to try to return it, basically he is very rude to her, doesn't even want to come and see her. So she basically takes some like scandalous pictures of herself on her phone and then sends it to his phone, and then drops the phone off. And then he goes through his phone later, he sees the pictures, and he decides to text her, and then, you know, a romance is going to go from there. So same kind of thing, really hot guy in a suit, very wealthy, has a good job, a little bit arrogant and all that sort of stuff. And then, you know, somehow they end up having a romance. So my reasoning for not liking this book, again, was because of its backstory. It's funny, I can't say it because of spoilers, but it was actually like the opposite of Egomaniac in such a specific way, but I still didn't like it. So if you've read both of these books, then maybe you'll get what I'm saying. If not, I just super confused you for no reason. But my point is that the backstory that happened in this book, again, I really didn't like. And because it is such like a driving point for the story, like it made me not like the story. Like, I loved the first half of the book, but then once it all started getting serious and things started happening in this guy's life, I was just like, ugh, I don't like this anymore. So I didn't really realize this until I actually started talking about all of these books, but I actually had a lot of books this month that I didn't really enjoy, which is kind of sad, but at the same time, I still want to tell you what I thought about them. So sorry for putting all of the bad books first, but I'm just going to finish them up, and then we're going to get to all of the good books. So next up, I have Twisted Love by Anna Hong. So this is a brother's best friend's romance, and unfortunately, I didn't love it, and it was super hyped up, and therefore it kind of made me even more disappointed that so many people love this book. So to start, I do understand why people are into it. The romance aspect of it, and the steam, and the fact that this guy was very alpha male-y, you're mine, nobody else can touch you, like all of those vibes were right on point, and I thoroughly enjoyed that aspect of it. But then the entire plot line was the biggest fail for me. I thought that there were, you know, it was not very well laid out. Like, at some points it was super serious, and then it just like dropped off the face of the planet, and then it came back like full force. And I was just like, the story in general was not vibing with me. Like, it was way too intense on the kind of like edge of ridiculous. Like, I don't want to be too mean about it, but like, I was just like, what the hell is this book? And then the characters at some point were very like childish. Like, at one point, the girls were playing this game of like trying to get the guy to feel emotions, and I'm like, are you guys 12? Like, this is so like, I don't know. It was just a little bit weird for me. So the only redeemable thing in this book was honestly the romance. Like, I liked the steamy scenes, and the buildup wasn't horrible, and I really was into the guy when he wasn't like dealing with his plotline stuff. So I don't know, basically I really didn't like this book, even though, you know, the romance was okay. And honestly, I wasn't even going to continue with the series, but I do already own book 2. So I think I might give it a shot very far in the future, because so many people are like, okay, book 2 is 1,000 times better, even though it's about a princess and a bodyguard, which is already making me cringe, because like the way that this book went, the fact that I know that book 2 is a princess and a bodyguard, like I don't think I'm very much going to be into it, but because I own it, I'm going to give it a shot, but not anytime soon. Next, I have Only When It's Us, which was so kindly gifted to me this past month by one of my followers, Kim, which thank you so much for this. I was so happy to get a surprise in the mail. So I decided to actually pick it up right away. And I didn't love it as much as I was hoping to, but it wasn't horrible either. So there were just some stuff in it that I wasn't a fan of. So first, let me tell you what it's actually about. So it's about this girl who is on the soccer team in her college, and she's also taking this math class, but because of, you know, her whole schedule schedule, being like a pro athlete and everything like that, she is not doing so well in the class. So the professor basically tells her to get notes from the guy sitting next to her. So she tries getting his attention and basically he's ignoring her and she gets really pissed off. And then he looks over at her and like she's scowling at him and all of a sudden he's like, what the hell did I do? And the thing is that he's actually like late deaf, like he turned deaf later in life. So now he doesn't talk, he only communicates through text, and basically he couldn't hear her when she was trying to get his attention. So they kind of start off not on good terms. They kind of like turn into enemies right away. They don't really get along. And then they end up getting paired up for a project together in class. So now they actually have to work together. So they kind of turn into like frenemies. Like they're always bickering. They don't really get along, but they have to work together. So they're always like hanging out and whatever. That's kind of where the story goes. And obviously a romance is going to bloom. So my issue with this book, first of all, is the guy had a beard the whole time, which I hate facial hair. Like if it's a little bit more than scruff, I'm not into it. And the problem was that they kept mentioning it and it was bugging me every time. Like she would always mention how like he has a squirrel on his face and like how he looks like, you know, a crazy lumberjack. And like, I don't really mind flannel shirts or anything like that. Like you should see my husband, he's in construction. He wears a flannel shirt every day. Like I'm into that. I was just not into the beard or the way that like he was described. And I could have gone over it if they only mentioned it a couple times, but it was mentioned very often throughout the book. So it just like pissed me off every time. But then actually for the plot line, there was so much miscommunication going on in this book that kind of just kept driving the story. Like he hid something from her and therefore she wanted to get retaliation on him, but like he didn't really know why she was pissed specifically. And then it just kept like going on and on from there. And like they both were like kind of hiding things from each other. And if only they would have spoken up and like actually talked to each other, it all could have been avoided. And like the entire story, like all the ups and downs were basically fueled by miscommunication. And I am not a fan of that. And then I don't know what it was about the book, but for some reason, I just wasn't like pulled to keep turning the page, which is kind of like my subconscious telling me that I'm not so into it. So there wasn't something particularly wrong with this book that I could somewhat pinpoint other than, you know, the miscommunication and the fact that like I wasn't so into the guy's looks, which are very like personal things to me. Like the entire book was actually totally fine. It was a very slow burn, but in a pretty solid way. There was a lot of good tension and build up and angst and all that sort of stuff. Like that part was good, but then just something about it, I didn't want to keep picking it up. I kind of had to keep sitting myself down and being like, okay, finish the chapter before you look at your phone. And when that happens to me, I just know that for some reason, I'm not so into it. Next, I have Indigo Ridge by Devney Perry, which I was blown away by. I liked this so much more than I expected to. So this was the first book that I ever read by Devney Perry. It's the first book in the Eden series. And the reason why I wanted to read it was because I've been seeing a lot of people talk about her books, how they're very easy to read. They're very quick, fun. Like there's nothing too crazy about the book, but like they're very intriguing the whole time. They've got a good romance, good stories going on and things like that. And I'm like, that sounds solid to me. So I picked this book up, honestly, because I loved the cover. The blue was just like, wow, I noticed it. I wanted it. And the thing why I wasn't so sure if I was going to love it or not was because the book started off with a one-night stand. And I am very iffy about one-night stands at the beginning of the book. But honestly, in this book specifically, I was not bothered by it at all. So the story is basically about this girl who recently moved to town and she's going to be the new chief of police. And she goes to a bar one night and she basically meets this guy and she thinks that he is a tourist. So she's like, sure, I could sleep with you because I don't want to get, you know, involved with anybody in town to like make anything complicated. But if you're just passing through, then let's get it on. So they get it on. And then the next day or whenever it was, they basically bump into each other again while at lunch. And they realize that they both actually live there and they're both not tourists, because they both had the same thing in mind. Like he thought it also like, oh, well, she's just passing through because I don't know her. So, you know, no harm's done. But then there were a lot of harms done because they kept having to see each other basically because somebody was murdered on his property and now she is the chief of police and has to deal with it. So then they're thrown into each other's face again. So throughout this whole book, they basically started like sleeping together, starting a relationship, things like that, even though, you know, they didn't really want to, but they couldn't really help themselves. And the way that that was built up was actually really good. like in general, I wouldn't be down for that sort of story, but the way that this one played out, I was like, it wasn't bothering me whatsoever. I was all there for it. And then what made it really fun was actually the mystery that was going on the whole time. Like, it wasn't too intense or too scary, or like, it was kind of just like subtly going on in the background. Like, she was slowly trying to figure out what happened and everything like that. And I don't know, everything about this book was just like spot on. I loved it. It like takes place in this small town in Montana, and like the guy lives on this ranch, and I don't know, there was just such good vibes about it that I definitely plan to read more of Devney Perry's work, because I heard that all of her books are very similar in the sense of like how they feel like they just give off the same type of vibes, and a lot of them have mysteries going on, and they all take place in like small towns and stuff like that. So basically I am all here for it, and in 2022 I 100% plan to backlog all of her work. I also read There Are No Saints and then There Is No Devil by Sophie Lark. So this is the Sinners Duet that is basically about a serial killer who has a romance with the girl that he's stalking. So this was my first serial killer romance that I ever read, and I wasn't really sure what to expect about it, and then I was blown away in a really good way. So it's kind of about this guy who is a serial killer, and he's also a really famous artist in San Francisco or San Diego, somewhere like that. And basically there's another serial killer in town that is also a famous artist, and in the art community they are always like pitted against each other because they're like the top two, but then also secretly they're both serial killers and they know that each other are serial killers. And the story kind of starts off where this other serial killer kind of takes interest in the main girl of this story and decides to take her as his next victim. And basically she doesn't really die, and then she ends up getting on the radar of Cole, who is the main serial killer that we're following, and then he ends up getting crazy obsessed with her and stalking her, and the story just goes from there. So this series and duet, whatever you want to call it, was crazy. I absolutely loved it. I will admit that I liked book one more than I liked book two, but I thought that altogether it was a great story. It was way better than I expected it to be. Like, I seriously had no clue what I was getting involved in when you said like a serial killer romance, but I loved every bit of it. Like, it was crazy, it was dark, it was taboo, it was so out there, like, you know, very hardcore in the STEAM department, and just everything about it. I was a huge fan. And the last books that I'm going to share with you before we get into my little addicted / Callaway chat is the last 4 books in the Brutal Birthright series. So we have Savage Lover, Bloody Heart, Bloody Vow, and then Heavy Crown. So I read the first 2 books in this series, I don't know, sometime before the middle of November, and I thoroughly enjoyed them. Book 1 was Broken Night, I think, and it was an arranged marriage. And then book 2 was a kidnapping romance / a Beauty and the Beast retelling. Loved both of those books. I liked book 1 more though. And then we moved on to the rest of the series, and it kind of went up and down for me. So I really did like Savage Lover. It was basically about Nero, and he, you know, he's into drag racing and cars, and his romance was basically, you know, about this girl that he knew in high school, but he was never friends with, never really talked to, anything like that. And now it's a couple of years later, they're not in high school anymore, and they run into each other, and then they just have a really adorable romance. I really enjoyed this. There's also a heist in this book that I really loved, and you know, the girl is a mechanic, so it's got that vibe of like really cool cars, drag racing, you know, mechanic-y sort of stuff, and I loved it. There was nothing really bad about this book. The only issue that I had with it is that it was too small. I really do think that there could have been more build up with it, that, you know, we could have had a little bit more in the heist department. Like, there was so much that happened in this book, and it was also the smallest book in the series. And I just think that the one negative thing about Sophie Lark's books in general is that she gives you just enough that you can't really complain, but at the same time in your head you're always like, I could have had a little bit more. So that is kind of how I felt about this book specifically. So while I did like Nero's book, unfortunately, I didn't like Dante's book. So this is Bloody Heart. It is the 4th book in the series, and this is a second chance romance. So I actually have a really big issue with second chance romances in general, specifically when the whole reason why, you know, they didn't end up making up like all the way back when, you know, for it not to be an actual second chance is because of somebody's pride, or they never ran after her or something like that. And that is basically the reason why these 2 people were apart for 8 years. So the story kind of starts out where, you know, for the first 100 pages or so, they're 18 and they're 21, and you get to see them fall in love, and then something happens and she runs away, and then it jumps to 8 years later, and all of a sudden she is coming back to where, you know, the guy lives, and all of a sudden he's going to see her, and then, you know, the second chance romance develops. So I didn't like this book because it's a second chance romance. I thought though that for a second chance romance, it was actually done pretty well, but I can't really get over the fact that the whole reason why they weren't together for 8 years was because he had too much pride and he just didn't run after her all the way back when, because if he did, then they would have been together the whole time and everything would have been totally fine. Like, that's literally the reason of, like, he one time in this book was like, if only I sucked up my pride and ran after you back then, you know? So that aspect bothers me a little bit, but for what this book was, it actually was pretty solid. So if you're into second chance romances, I actually think you'd really enjoy this one. But if you don't like second chance romances, then this is a second chance romance. And then I read Broken Vow, which was the best book in the series without a doubt. Every single thing about this book was perfect. From the first page until the last page, I absolutely loved it. It is a bodyguard romance. It starts off with Riona, and basically somebody tried to kill her. She got away and he ran off, and, you know, now her family is worried that, you know, she is going to be chased after again. So they hire her a bodyguard, and then she ends up having a romance with him while they try to find the person that tried to kill her. And it was just amazing. I'm not going to tell you anything more than that because I don't want to spoil anything, but I'm just saying this was the best book in the series. Besides for The Arranged Marriage, which was the first book in the series, this one was amazing. Like, the whole time that I was reading this series, like, book one was my favorite up until I got to this one, and then this one blew it out of the water. So this was definitely my favorite from the series, and then runned up by The Arranged Marriage, which was book one, and then, you know, it gets a little sloppy after that. Probably The Kidnapping Romance ended up being third, and then Nero's, which was book three, and then, you know, The Second Chance Romance goes after that, and then the last book in the series is my least favorite. But that was super confusing. But if you wanted to know my order of how I liked it, that is the order. You can go and replay that if I said it too quickly. But basically, I absolutely loved this book wholeheartedly. And the last book in the series was Heavy Crown, which unfortunately was my least favorite from this series. So this book basically starts off with this girl who is getting kidnapped, and then the guy, Sebastian, basically hears her screaming and goes and helps her and saves her. And then they end up going to this party together. They hang out a little bit, and basically, you know, she gives him his number, and, you know, she's like, okay, you should call me. And then he doesn't call her because she is actually the daughter of the Russian mafia, and he is the son of the Italian mafia, and the mafias don't get along very well. So he's like, I don't think it's a really good idea if I call her because, you know, it can only start trouble because our families are kind of at war with each other. So then a week later, they actually bump into each other again because they're both at this auction, and she is basically put up for auction to win a date with. So for some reason, he ends up bidding on her. They go on a date, and then it kind of just develops from there, and they end up falling in love. So I actually absolutely hated this book because the entire romance was based on lies and deception, which I absolutely hate. I just feel like if someone would have spoken up at some point, then the entire problem of this book could have been avoided, and I really do hate that. I also think that both characters were extremely naive, and they both put themselves in the situation that they got into, and it could have been easily avoided, and it could have been easily done differently. And I don't know, just everything about it I wasn't a big fan of. I also thought that, like, the guy, Sebastian, like, his family should have seen through some of this stuff, and they shouldn't have let it get that far, and they put themselves in that situation. And I just thought that they would be way smarter than that. And then at the halfway point of this book, it kind of took like a 180 and went in a different direction. And honestly, the 180 kind of gave me whiplash. I was just like, all that happened way too quick. Like, everything went from really nice and sweet to really dark and crazy. And I don't know, just everything about this I really wasn't a fan of. Honestly, I skimmed like the second half of the book. I was like, I really don't care about any of this anymore once everything went down. And basically, unfortunately, I didn't like it. I hate not liking last books in the series, but what you gonna do? I still absolutely loved some of the books in this series. I still highly recommend it. You know, you got 6 books. Some of them were hits, some of them were misses, and unfortunately, this one was a miss for me. And now for the Addicted series. So I had the most amazing couple of weeks reading all 10 of these books. I absolutely love them. I mean, they made it to my #1 spot of 2021. Like, it was my favorite read from 2021 without a doubt. And not only is it my favorite read from the year, but it is my new favorite series of all time. time in the romance department. I do think that, you know, in different genres, you can have a favorite from each genre. So my number one favorite series of all time in the fantasy genre is Throne of Glass. And now my favorite book slash series in the romance department is without a doubt the Addicted series. So I absolutely love them, and I really did thoroughly enjoy every single book in the series. But there were some that I enjoyed more than others. So I actually have all 10 of them sitting right in front of me, and I've been staring at them for a while, trying to put them in a specific order. And honestly, it is really hard because I love every single one of them. There are a couple that I was able to give their spot to, but there are also some like kind of in the middle where they're all just jumbled up. Like I wasn't sure which one I liked more. But basically, my favorite book from the entire Addicted Calloway series is without a doubt Addicted After All. So this is actually the last book in Lily and Lo's story, and I just loved it. There was something about the ending of this book. I mean, it happens to be the entire book from beginning to end. It was the end of their story, and I just think it was absolutely perfect. I mean, if you've read this book before, then you just know that, like, I don't know, it's giving me chills just thinking about it. I loved this book without a doubt. And I think that throughout all 10 books, Lily and Lo were my favorite. Like, I was so worried for them the whole time. And the fact that they always stuck by each other, like throughout all of their ups and downs, just, I don't know, it was so perfect. It was so much better than I thought it was going to be. And the fact that this was their last book and they ended up getting their happily ever after, I don't know, for some reason I couldn't help but putting it as my favorite book from the series. And then I think my favorite book after that is Hot House Flower, which is Daisy and Reich's first book. So I remember reading this one and being like, oh my God, I was blown away. I absolutely loved it. So Daisy and Reich, they have an age gap romance, and just something about the beginning of their love story just did it for me. And I absolutely loved it. Like, I definitely love Daisy and Reich more than I love Connor and Rose, even though I love everybody. Like, without a doubt, I love everybody. But if I had to pick favorites, I do love Daisy and Reich more than Connor and Rose, and therefore I kind of really enjoyed the first book in their story a ton. And then I decided to put Addicted After You as my third favorite, mostly because, I don't know, it was kind of like the beginning of everything. And I don't know, I loved it. It's like, without this book, the entire 10-book series wouldn't have happened. And there's just something about beginnings that I'm always a huge fan of. Like, I'm usually the biggest fan of first books in a series, so I decided to put this one next. And then after that, I've decided to put Some Kind of Perfect, which is the epilogue, because this book literally is some kind of perfect. There was absolutely nothing wrong with the epilogue. I loved it from beginning to end. My only complaint is that it was too short. It was the largest book in the series. It was a whopping like 729 pages or something like that. And I seriously thought that it needed to be longer. Like, we were following all 6 characters. We were seeing everybody's point of views. It was taking place throughout the course of 10 years as all of their children were growing up. And I think that this book should have been like 10 books, not 1 book. But that is just me trying to say how much I loved it and how amazing I think it was as an epilogue to this story. Like, these characters deserve so much. And if this was all we can get from them, then it literally was Some Kind of Perfect. And then I wanted to put Ricochet and Addicted for now kind of smack in the middle of this series, because there was nothing wrong with these books. Therefore, like, I don't have anything negative really to say about them, but also, like, I had some books that I enjoyed more than this. So these are basically the sandwiched part of the series where, like, I loved them, but also, like, there were better ones and then there were worse ones in the series. So yeah, I mean, I love Lily and Lo, so these are both their story, and I seriously have nothing bad to say about these, even though I couldn't put them higher, because, you know, I'm trying to put them in an order and something's got to go in the middle. Then I have Long Way Down, which is my 4th to least favorite book in the series. So the thing is this is Daisy and Reich's, you know, final book, and I thoroughly did enjoy it, but it was a little bit more hard-hitting and intense, and, you know, they were going through a lot of stuff, and there was so much that happened in this book in such an amazing way. Like, this was the ending to the series, basically. Like, this was the book that came before the epilogue, and it was such an amazing ending, but also, like, there was a lot of serious things happening, and therefore I liked a lot of the books more than this one. And even though I don't really have anything bad to say about this, because I loved every book, you know, I'm just trying to put them in an order. So this one unfortunately had to be my 4th to least favorite because of the seriousness and the things that happened in this book and everything like that. It was just a little bit mentally draining, but again, in kind of a great way. Then for spot number 3 and spot number 2 is Kiss the Sky and Fuel the Fire, which is Connor and Rose's story. So again, I loved everybody in this story, but they were my least favorite, and happens to be the stuff that happened in both of these books were my least favorite stuff that happened throughout all of the books. Like, I don't really want to say because of spoilers, but the actual stuff that happened in these books were my least favorite topics from the books, even though it was the most important part of the story because it's kind of what made the entire rest of the story happen. Like, without Kiss the Sky, they wouldn't be who they are today, you know? And then Fuel the Fire was kind of like finishing up what happened at the end of Kiss the Sky, like everything finally got, you know, concluded. So I thought that these two were extremely important to the story, but they still were my least favorite. And if you want to know why in detail, then you should watch the vlogs about these two books. And then my least favorite book from this series was Thrive, mostly because this was a repetitive book and it was basically the same information that we got in Kiss the Sky and Hot House Flower repeated just from Lillian Lowe's POV. And while it did have a lot of really good information, and again, we were in Lillian Lowe's perspective, which I love them, and therefore I love anything that comes out of, you know, their heads sort of thing. I didn't like this book so much because I already knew everything that was happening in this book, and there were some scenes that were literally like word for word taken from the other books, so I just felt like I was reading it all over again. And because I did binge this series, this one felt way too like rememberable for me, or whatever you want to call it. So unfortunately, I didn't love this book so much, but it's only because I already knew all the information in it, sort of thing, you know? But again, I loved every single book in this series, and I just put it in order because you guys asked for it. So that is the order that you're getting. Let me try holding it up for you. So this is the order in which I liked them, from, you know, top to least favorite. Like, you know, because you guys asked me to put it in an order, I tried my hardest to put it in a favorite to least favorite order. But this is the actual order that I read them in and that I recommend reading them in. So if you actually want to know more about this series and everything like that, then I do have the whole How to Read the Addicted Calloway Sisters series, why I recommend putting it in the order that I just showed you, and everything that you might need to know about it. So again, the whole playlist for the Addicted series is going to be linked down below. You know, it has that video as well as all of the vlogs that I made for these books. So if you haven't seen them yet and you're interested, then make sure to check out the description. But anyway, that is my very lengthy wrap up from the middle of November until the end of December. So I'm curious to know if you read any of these books and, you know, what you thought about them, or maybe let me know what your favorite book from 2021 is, because my favorite book / series was the Addicted / Calloway Sisters series. So I'm curious to know what yours was, because maybe I'll add it to my 2022 want to read list. But anyway, again, thank you so much for watching this video. If you did make it to the end, then make sure to give it a like if you haven't already. If you're not currently subscribed to my channel, hit that subscribe button. And again, thank you so much. And until next time, enjoy reading.